Hi friends, today we're going to be doing some good old-fashioned Q&A. I think actually 2 weeks ago, I went on Instagram and asked you guys for some questions you'd like for me to answer. And I got a lot of lovely questions. I think, unfortunately, I won't be able to cover all of them, but I'm going to cover some of them, as many as I can. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Okay, so I don't know if I should say the person that said it. I won't. I'll keep it anonymous for you guys. Let's see. Let's start with a simple one. What do you think about Buddhism? All right. So I love Buddhism. I think it's wonderful. I've been practicing, I would say, a mix of Buddhism and Hinduism for, well over a decade now, probably since I was 15 or something. I started kind of getting really into it and reading about it and then going to temples. I think it's a lovely practice. The only kind of little caution is just, I try not to get caught up in any isms very deeply. Ultimately, Buddhism, like many of these, Eastern philosophies and vehicles for awakening, are that just vehicles, and at the end we have to get off of the raft once we reach the other shore. So ultimately I do feel that Buddhism is not to just be a good Buddhist. That's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to become enlightened and not get caught up in any of these identities of isms. So yeah, instead of having it be like a little badge for our identity, using it and eventually having it dissolve until there's no boundaries, no separation between different ideologies. At the end of the day, it's all love, and the truth is the truth. So it shouldn't further divide us, but more deeply unite us, right? The ultimate truth. But needless to say, I think it's lovely, and I recommend everybody to check it out because it has a lot of wisdom and it's taught me infinitely. All right, so let's see. The next question: have you ever experienced telepathy? I would say so. There's been a couple occasions, especially when working with plant medicines. For example, my first ayahuasca journey, me and the person sitting right next to me saw the same thing. Afterwards, we were kind of talking about kind of the experience we had, and we saw the same thing. So I do think that there's these places we can tap into sometimes at the same time. This happens a lot with my art also, where I make a lot of artworks that I experience through these mystical states, may that be through meditation or any kind of altered state of consciousness, astral projection, lucid dreaming, just altering the regular everyday consciousness. And I end up tapping into these spaces that I then make artworks of. I believe that's my job that I specialize in. And I get a lot of people saying oh, I've been to that exact same place. I thought no one else had been there. And now I can see that it wasn't just me. So in a way, I think that kind of is a form of telepathy, that we're tapping into these same spaces, even though it's not necessarily at the same exact moment. Even though I have had some occasions where it has been in the same moment. So I would say so, but it's not something I specialize in by any means. I wouldn't say I'm perfect at telepathy or anything. All right. Next question. How do you astral project? This is a very loaded question because it's not easy to describe in a couple sentences without, doing a whole long video on it. Even though I did recently do a video on lucid dreaming, which is very similar. And you can check that out on my channel if you want to learn how to lucid dream. And astral projection is just one step further from that. So if you master lucid dreaming, which I go in depth about in that video, then all you have to do is, while you're lucid dreaming, is go back to your body, feel where you are lying on your bed, and then one technique that you can do, there's a few techniques, but the technique that I use is I imagine pulling a rope in front of me. Like, and if my hands are stuck, which sometimes they are, in this, when you're going through sleep paralysis and stuff, you can't really move your arms very easily. You can just imagine new arms and just pull, and that usually propels your body out, and then you'll be astral projecting. So that's kind of like a quick summary without going too in depth about it. But if you guys want me to do a full video on how to astral project, let me know and I'll go into depth. All right, next question. What is the most profound vision you've ever seen, psychedelic or sober? It depends on what you consider profound, but I would say the experience out of all experiences that stands out the most as very special and dear to my heart, I would say was from 5-MeO DMT. And ironically, it wasn't much of a vision. It was like transcending visions, because I have, I would consider myself an explorer of consciousness, and then I create that and use that to create art. But this almost transcended all visions, and in that, ironically, that was the most profound vision. Because I've, if you worked with plant medicines or deep breath work or lucid dreaming or, all these kind of ways of altering consciousness, we can experience these realms of fractals and intense intricacies, but there's still a sensation of observer and observed. And at one point, you can kind of go one floor up from that, where it all dissolves and there's no observer or observed, and it's all just one pure source. And I had felt that I had dipped my toes into that quite a handful of times through various other means, but 5-MeO was a full plunge into dissolving into the formless realm. So that was probably, to me, one of the most beautiful and profound visions. All right. How did you start meditating? Okay, so I started when I was probably, I was like 15, 14. I don't exactly remember. It was like early high school or late middle school. I kind of started dabbling with it. I tried a few times when I was, I think, in middle school, but I only got really serious about it like early high school. And it was just because in middle school, I got very into lucid dreaming. I started lucid dreaming when I was 12, and it just kind of opened this whole world. Like, I was flying through planets in my dreams and dancing on Saturn's rings and just exploring galaxies. And I was like, wow, there's like so much more that people aren't talking about, because, I'd go day to day and no one else was talking about all these super magical things that reality has. So I got very interested in exploring consciousness, ultimately. And I was a huge bookworm. I still am, not as much. I'm mostly focused on painting now. But at the time, I used to just always have a huge stack of books by my bed, and I would rotate through them. Read a chapter, put it at the bottom. Read a chapter, put it at the bottom. So I love reading. At the time, I kind of was thinking of being a writer. And while my mom, who loved shopping, would go shopping for hours and hours on end, I would be at the bookstore. That's where, when we were at the mall, she'd go shopping and she'd leave me at the bookstore. And I spent hours just reading all the books, as much as I can, just digging through all of them, very open-minded, just trying to find more of this magical stuff I was experiencing through my lucid dreams. So I ended up, going into the spiritual section and the Eastern philosophy sections, and I started picking up books on Buddhism and reading a little bit about them, and ended up buying some, and what they said was really profound and really touched me in a deep way. I think in ways that my soul knew it had experienced in previous lifetimes is the best way I can describe it. And it also really caught my eye because since a young age, I would like sit in the full lotus position. If you guys are familiar with the lotus position in yoga, where you kind of cross your legs like, like a pretzel. And I didn't know like why I did that, but then I would notice that a lot of images of Buddha and people meditating would be in that position. So I was like, what's meditation? And I started reading about it, started practicing it, and it felt right. Is the best way I can say is it just felt like the thing that a piece of the puzzle that felt very essential for me had just been placed in its right spot. So I continued with it, and still try to do it every day is the goal. So that's kind of how I got into Buddhism. I guess books. Okay, so next person says, hi, love to you. Oh, so sweet. Would you speak about Salvia? Okay, so to be honest, I have not tried Salvia. There was a time when I was a young teenager, very interested in, I still am interested in exploring consciousness, but I was living in Florida at the time, and it was hard to get my hands on any sort of plant medicine. So I had an interest in trying salvia, but to be honest, I just heard far too many horror stories. Like, you hear about stories about people like taking mushrooms and feeling love with the universe and all these wonderful things, just as well as you hear kind of not so good stories. But with salvia, it seems like all the stories I heard from people that had taken it around me were just really bad nightmares. So for a moment, I thought about doing it. But then after hearing so many friends kind of try it out and have bad experiences, I was like, maybe not for me. And it kind of never presented itself after that. It just seems like, I'm sure that there's a beautiful way of doing it. I can't really speak too deeply about it because, again, I haven't tried it myself. But yeah, I'm sure I have friends now that have had very beautiful experiences on it. And but it seems like kind of like playing Russian roulette with that one. So I haven't tried it myself so far in life. And I don't know if I will. I think I'm in a good place right now. Okay. Let's see. How exactly does astral projection feel for you? Do you think it's crazy it's possible? It feels natural. To me, it kind of happens a lot. Well, maybe not a lot anymore, but it used to happen a lot just on its own, where I would just like levitate out of my body in my sleep. And it just, it felt natural in a way that I'm aware that we are far more than just what we can see here in the physical realm. We're multi-dimensional beings, and astral projection is just a very direct experience of that when, you are in the dream state and then you exit your body and you can explore this like world that's very similar to here, but with a tint of strangeness, of magic. I think it's something that the hardest thing about it is just doing it for the first time, believing in it. But if you look throughout history, the Egyptians used to do it, the Tibetan monks, I think, still have a practice of it. And, it's all over history. It used to be probably more prevalent, but it is something that can kind of shake people up, I think. Maybe that's why it's not talked about very deeply, because we're in this world where everything's kind of largely very logical. And when you throw in this aspect of, hey, by the way, you can exit your body and explore this like other space, it kind of shakes things up a little, right? So, but it's definitely worth trying. And, the question of whether you're actually going somewhere or if, it's something that's just happening mentally it's up to the individual person to decide. In my own experience, I have spend so much time there. Sometimes, what felt like in one night, like hundreds of years in that space, that to me personally, in my journey, there is no doubt that it is somewhere. But that's up to each individual. So I would say try it out. And, the best thing is to not just take other people's word for something, but have direct experience, right? This is why we practice deep meditation to, get these mystical experiences, or experiencing source, or experiencing astral projection, or these types of experiences. It's really something that I think needs to be experienced directly. And from there, we can very deeply get some personal understanding, right? Not just hearing what other people say, but it's a beautiful practice. I would say if someone's interested in exploring consciousness, it's something worth trying out, because it teaches you a lot, that very directly, that we can explore other spaces, I guess. All right, next question. Which dosage of magic mushrooms and other substances do you use or recommend? Well, I am not recommending anything here. Each person, each adult should make, their own decisions on what is best for their own journey. And a little disclaimer, there are some people that don't need to do it at all. It's not for everybody. And that's something that I think I've come to understand. When I was younger, I used to be like, oh, it's a wonderful experience. Everybody should try it. It's like magical. But, as I've had a lot of these experiences and have seen a lot of people on these experiences, I deeply understand that it's something that needs to be integrated really well. And there's some people that, it's not necessary or beneficial, but there is a lot of people that it is. Like myself, I have found a lot of benefit from plant medicines, even though I have to admit, it's been a couple years since I've worked with them. Right now, my medicine is meditation. And the big trip I am on is life. Though I have had many plant medicine experiences in the past, and still have a very deep appreciation and draw a lot of insight from those previous experiences. But if I had to say, like, just as what I would recommend to myself, if my younger self, is don't get caught up in this, what happens with some of these subcultures of people that use psychedelics, where it's like, oh, like I took like a whole sheet of acid and it's like a flex in a way. Don't get caught up in that. Each person is individual. Doing big doses does not make you more enlightened or more, well, necessarily more like give you more enlightenment points or more status in some way. Like, the whole point of these experiences is to let go of these identities, of these judgments of I'm more spiritual or I'm less spiritual than this person. It's about like letting go of all those notions, shedding more and more notions. And for that, we don't need these big doses. In fact, we don't necessarily need any psychedelics. They can't. For some people, it is useful. For some people, meditation is the way. I mean, for some people, a mix of the two. Or for some people, it's breath work. For some people, it's yoga. Various techniques. But I would say start small and listen to your body. Don't go off of what everybody else is doing, because each person is individual. For example, myself, I'm very visual, and I'm a fairly thin gal. So for me, low doses take me on very intense experiences, and I don't need massive doses to have a profound experience, even though I have also taken larger doses. And sometimes those larger doses weren't as insightful. So it's not about like achieving this big dose. It's not like the goal. The goal is, to be kinder, wiser, to come out and integrate it. And work your way up from a small dose and listen to your body. All right. Okay. Take a sip of water. Okay. Tell us the most supernatural experience you had. Okay, so I would say the 5-MeO experience for sure was, to me, the most impactful experience I've had. But regarding supernatural, it's like what you describe as supernatural. I won't go very into it, but I worked with hypnosis for a while, with mixing sometimes small microdoses of mushrooms or DMT. And how do I say this stuff? Let's see. I went into this hypnosis not expecting much, but I ended up living my whole life, like Juliana's life, all the way until old age, and forgetting I was in a hypnosis and just like living my day regularly. And then died, as an old lady, took my last breath. I was like, okay, here comes death. And then I woke up, so that was really trippy. That was, I would say, like, supernatural. I would say that was pretty supernatural. And I've heard of people in comas having similar experiences, even though those are super rare. And I think the thing is, when someone has an experience like that, it's not something one talks about a lot necessarily, just because it can be a lot to, process or share with people. But that's as far as I'm going to go into it. Okay. How are you inspired by Indian mythology? Fascinating, says the person. Okay. Star emoji. Okay, so I am very deeply inspired by Indian mythology, as you can probably see through my art. And how do I say this? I do believe it is more than Indian mythology. It is, in a way, universal mythology to some degree. Because to fully believe in some realm these deities existing, like Shiva, like Kali, like Ganesha, to designate it to a particular country would be kind of a contradiction, because if they really exist, they would be more like universal. So that's how I see them. I do believe there is a realm that I have experienced where I've interacted with these deities, and that's why I make so much art about them. And it's largely, I have to admit, it's largely been through DMT, where I have gone to their like temple, where I've, had these experiences where I visit them in their kind of home, which is like a temple, and I go talk to them and I go hang out with them. And I believe they're universal archetypes in some way, at least this is, my own experience. But I've also heard a lot of people through DMT having seen these beings. So I would say that before working with DMT, I was very into yogic traditions and philosophies. But the deities, in a way, like, I understood them as kind of like an archetype, but I didn't have a personal relationship with them until I started working very deeply with DMT, and I started to see them and experience them. And this is just, my own experience. So just sharing what I've experienced personally. But I started to very deeply connect with them. I would say especially Shiva, have a very, very deep love for Shiva. And that was so deeply inspiring to me, where, I would see source energy, the formless, kind of split into the original two dualities, which was Shiva and Shakti, and then from there turn into these other major archetypes such as Ganesha and Hanuman, and I would experience my own connection with them, how they were not only something to admire externally, but, there was an aspect of them within myself, personal connection. And it was so personal, so profound that I couldn't help but make art about it. And I'm happy that some other people resonate with it. But yeah. All right. Where would you choose to be born? You guys asked some good questions. I would say if I could choose, I would choose to not be born again. Right? Ideally, I do the final lap. Have this be a final lap through samsara, and then enjoy dissolving back into pure consciousness. And yeah, I guess if I could choose, that's what I would choose. All right. Let's see. What's your experience with astral projection? I think we already covered that. All right. Do you use generative AI in your art? Okay. So this is a controversial topic, especially I still feel like we're in the midst of it. It's almost like when photography came around, it completely changed the art world, right? Before that, if we look at art history, people that were artists were mostly painting portraits, realistic things. They were, in a way, the photographers, right? And so art was very centered around realism and accurate depictions. Then the camera got introduced and it jumbled everything up. And now artists were not, if this device did what artists were doing, they had to pivot. And that's where a lot of the abstract movement and more expressive art came around. And now artists were not trying to depict exactly what was seen through the eye, but their emotions. They were trying to depict feelings and express colors. And it completely shifted the art world, right? Very, very drastically. But it also became a tool. Photography became a tool. Some people became photographers. That's what they did. That was the end product. They took the photos and that was the end product. And that became a form of art. And some people didn't use photography at all. They just threw paint and, chose that. And some people would start using reference photos. They would, have a photograph and then from there they would paint. So they kind of started to use it as a tool, right? They started using photography as a tool. And when all this happened, it wasn't very clear because you were in the midst of it. And I still think that AI art, we're still in the midst of it where artists are kind of still in that pivoting motion. So very similar with AI art. AI art came out before that, a lot of people, did digital art. I was working a lot with both acrylic and digital art and, oil painting and all this. But since AI art came out, there was kind of a few choices. And, each person, each artist chose their path. Some chose to have that be the final product. They became AI artists. And nothing wrong with that. That's, just like some people became photographers, some people decided to become AI artists. I didn't want to become an AI artist, nor do I want to. Like, that wouldn't be the final product. And then there's some people that completely disregarded it and are against it, which I understand because, it is, some platforms are using other people's art to generate this art. And I hope that these platforms start using things in a more moral way. But I also feel like the technology is here and we can either progress with it or we can try to resist it. So I try to be a very open-minded person and kind of embrace new technology. So for me, what I've been trying to do in a way is not become an AI artist, nor deny the fact that this new technology is out, but trying to see how I can use it as a tool to make my own visions, what I would be doing anyways, better. So just like how some artists started using photography for reference photos and improved their art through that, Not that I don't want to use AI art as the whole reference photo and just be repainting AI art. So I've just been trying to see how I can, and my opinion is subject to change. It's still very new in a way. So I'm just trying to figure out, especially because I paint such surrealist, imaginary things. There's some things that it's very hard to find photos to reference, some textures and stuff, and certain elements, it can be useful to look at AI art and use that to further enhance one's own art and use it as a tool without it having being the whole thing. I don't want it to rob me of my creativity or of my skill, because I have been a professional artist for many, many years before AI art even existed. So I don't want it to take over my creativity by any means, but seeing how it can be another tool in my tool belt, just like looking at reference photos is a tool in my tool belt, just as, just drawing from my imagination is a tool in my tool belt. Maybe there's some things like certain textures that are just, there's no photography for that, and maybe looking at that texture in AI art and then using it and painting an oil painting and including that, a texture inspired by that or something like that. I'm still figuring it out. We're still it's still, pretty new, but I would say that's where I'm at. And, no options wrong, but that's just what I'm doing. All right. I think we covered everything. All right. Okay, so I'll be doing another Q&A sometime soon. Thank you, everybody that asked questions. There was a few other questions, but, don't want to get too deep into them. This is already a 30-minute video, but thank you. If you watched this whole video, thank you so much. And if you want me to answer any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And yeah, thank you everybody that asked questions, and lots of love to all of you.